The Formed Book Club. Catholic book lovers unpacking good books, chapter by chapter.
Welcome to the Formed Book Club, or hopefully welcome back, because we're towards the middle, beyond the middle of this wonderful book, The Drama of Atheist Humanism by Father Henri de Lubac. And we spent a lot of time on it. It's a long book, but it's full of a lot of very interesting material and insights. And we're now talking about Nietzsche as prophet, which is chapter...
So, Dostoyevsky is prophet.
Did I say Nietzsche? I'm sorry. Dostoyevsky is prophet. He talked about Nietzsche, Feuerbach, Marx, and Kant as figures in the 19th century who attempted different forms of an atheist humanism, that is, how to enhance man's life by taking God out of the picture. And, Dostoevsky is the one who shows that won't work. And we're in chapter 2 of the section Dostoevsky is prophet. And De Lubac is talking about three kinds of atheism that Dostoevsky is responding to. We talked about the first one, the God-man. We got the Nietzschean Superman or Overman. We're on the second one, which is the Tower of Babel, the idea of creating a society without God. And the third one will be the House of Glass and the philosophical atheism. So we're on, by my count, on page 325.
I thought we got to the Palace of Glass. Am I wrong?
I did too. I thought we got to the palace. We left off to go to the Palace of Glass next.
All right. I'm wrong. I marked it down wrong.
So that's 334, Father.
Hate to have that on tape, my saying I'm wrong, but there it is. So what page are we on then? Page 334.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Joseph, take it away.
Okay, well, one thing I think somewhere in the dim recesses of my aging memory, I did know this. I had read this somewhere before, but I'd forgotten. So it was good to be reminded that Dostoevsky was friends with Vladimir Soloviev, who's often called the Russian Newman, and of course, eventually a convert to Catholicism, which again is itself intriguing considering Dostoevsky's own anti-Catholicism. So on page 334, he says he took an interest in Soloviev's lectures, and then we have the footnote 57. The young philosopher, that's obviously Soloviev, and the novelist had been friends since 1873. And then we have this is Dostoevsky. I am weak in philosophy, but not in the love I have for it. I am strong in the love I have for it. So, I just find that sort of something which kindles my heart, so to think that there was this affinity between Dostoevsky and this great Russian philosopher who becomes a Catholic, often called the Russian Newman, Vladimir Soloviev. So I wanted to just mention that.
Okay, that's like someone saying Jesus is weak in theology because he tells stories. But, I think Dostoevsky is strong in philosophy, intuitively. He expresses it, in images and in narratives.
And I have nothing then after that till 338. So if either of you trump that, then please go ahead.
Well, I like on 335 with the central there, center.
Okay.
The rational universe is not simply the universe. Nobody had bothered to explain how it happens that in practice, this beautiful palace of glass, that is the philosophic idea of the world in itself, produces the effect of a dark jail. Yet it is a fact that calls for exclamation about 3 lines down. It is in this Achilles heel that Dostoevsky wounds the enemy here being this philosophical atheism. In a word, he raises the problem of the irrational. And if it is true that problem now seems exactly like the great problem of our own times, this again gives the measure of Dostoevsky's importance in the history of thought. So I think that's De Lubac speaking, I think.
Yeah, and I think, Father, you and I taught a course at Ivy University in the spring on Chesterton. And of course, there's a part of Chesterton's orthodoxy where he talks about this sort of atheism that Dostoevsky is addressing here as being a prison. There's, imagine Reading Jail is now miles and miles long, and there's nothing but more prison corridors under artificial light. And of course, Tolkien, and you and I will be teaching Tolkien and Lewis in the fall, takes that up in his famous lecture and essay on fairy stories about the flight of the prisoner from this atheism that endeavors to imprison us within a purely material cosmos.
And you folks can correct me if I'm wrong here, because I'm not very good on these global views of intellectual history, but was not Romanticism kind of a reaction to over-intellectualism that came from the Enlightenment, that when reason was crowned, that was so dry and arid and cold and stiff that there was a response to more sentimentalism or more sensual things? Is that right?
Absolutely, romanticism. Well, romanticism, of course, we can be a little bit careful. It's slippery, because English romanticism is different from German romanticism or Spanish romanticism or French romanticism. But certainly, I can only speak with any sort of authority about English romanticism, and that was definitely a reaction against the empiricism of the Enlightenment, the ideas of people such as of Hobbes, that basically the transcendentals are a path to truth, specifically beauty. And that was their way of, if you like, transcending, circumventing this cold, palace of glass that we're talking about here.
Also, just a little side remark here that is a danger in Protestantism of becoming over intellectual, because it's a religion of the word. And I recall years ago, when I first went to Regensburg in then West Germany, walking down the street, and there was a Protestant church there. I think it was called Holy Trinity Church. And you looked in the windows. The windows were not stained glass; they were just kind of plain glass. Of course, it was during a weekday, so it was empty. No lights are on. Inside, you had chairs and a table and a pulpit, and that was it. If the word of God is not being spoken, nothing is happening in that church.
Right. Yeah.
Down the street, the polar opposite was the cathedral there, which was not just Baroque, it was Rococo. And you walked in, it was open in the daytime. Everything was gilded, and there was angels, and there was light coming in, and there was, people in there praying. You had this sense of incarnation. The word became flesh, not just logos, but logos incarnate. Anyway.
And the flesh was not just made man, but made beautiful.
Yep. All right, you're on 338 now, Joseph.
You have anything before that, Vivian?
Well, this reaction of the irrational to the overly rational, which Dostoevsky is so intrigued by, and brings it out in these characters who, on page 336, this explanation that nature does not ask for our opinion. It hasn't got to pay any attention to our prejudices. We've got to take it as we find it. But because the rationalistic or scientistic approach to nature is so reductionist and limited, then sometimes people reacting against that, they go too far and react against rationality itself, like wanting 2 + 2 to = 5 and this kind of thing. And Dostoevsky actually probably ran into people like this who, and there's a part of his own soul that is in rebellion against this reduction of the universe to these formulas. There's just got to be more to it than that.
I think in this chapter, the next one, I think that's what De Lubac is grappling with, is that the danger, of course, of reacting against rationalism by overreacting against it, and
Yes.
basically, embracing the irrational. And Dostoevsky plays with that in his characters. The real question is, I'm not sure I know the answer, is to what extent does he succumb to it himself, or is he just voicing it within the characters of the
Well,
novels?
I think De Lubac does a beautiful job later in this section on showing that, or maybe it's in the next section, The Experience of Eternity, in showing that these different characters are expressing different elements of Dostoevsky himself. You know, there's a part of the rebel that is irrational, but that doesn't mean that resisting this reduced view of man is irrational, you know? But like you say, Joseph, the rebel can go too far.
You might
And
be right for the wrong reasons, so to speak, right?
and
The
and
rebellion might
and
be
and
helpful,
but
but you might be
Dostoevsky sympathizes with the rebel. And so on 338, I think this is a very important quote from De Lubac. The thing that Dostoevsky is rejecting here is not the evidence itself, meaning the evidence for a rational universe. It is the rationalist claim that it should apply to spheres that are outside of its competence, right?
yes.
When we
Yes,
have
physics
atheist
cannot judge. Physics
scientists,
cannot judge metaphysics, right?
yes,
Physics cannot judge metaphysics,
yes, yes.
right? Well,
Yeah.
that's the section, Vivian, that I also highlight in the 338. So I don't know if Father has anything. I now long as Vivian sort of trumped me by quoting my own quote there. I
Ah,
have nothing to 342 now. So anybody before that?
well, first I want an interjection based on what David just said. That I think it comes out later, but even though we can't say that all the characters in a novel are speaking for the author, nevertheless, I think there's a way in which Brothers Karamazov, all four brothers are Dostoevsky. I mean, they're the rebel, they're the rationalist, the sentimentalist, and then the saint.
Yeah, but I think, Father, we have to be careful because I think yes, they are. It's like, for instance, as an analogy here, Hilaire Belloc wrote a wonderful book called The Four Men, and The Four Men is about a walk across Sussex where myself, who's ostensibly Belloc, is walking with the sailor, the poet, and Grizzlebeard, the old man who's the historian. And of course, these are all four facets of Belloc's own persona. All right, he is an historian, he is a poet, he is a sailor, and he's myself, right, the person mediating. But these are all coherent, they don't contradict each other, even if they might break with each other. I think that Dostoevsky is giving voice to various aspects that he has, if you like, toyed with, flirted with. But I think we need to be careful of thinking that the man himself is torn in four different directions and has no coherence or cohesiveness within himself. Because if he,
Well,
if he didn't, he wouldn't be able to write these beautiful works of coherent fiction.
De Lubac takes a different view. Um, he says on page 366, and I'm jumping way ahead here, that each of these characters is an aspect of himself, and that the idea that these are in conflict with each other um, is not an argument against their existence within the same person. And later on in the same section, De Lubac mentions, there is this duality in ourselves, like St. Paul himself says, the good that I want to do, I don't do, and the evil I don't want to do, I do.
But he
So,
knows the difference.
yes,
He knows which one is better.
And Dostoevsky knows the difference too, but the fact that there's a real struggle in every man, and that, I mean, De Lubac even goes farther to say that, we say we know ourselves, we don't really know ourselves, we're not really capable of an objective honesty about ourselves, that Dostoevsky's bringing to dramatic life these different aspects of not just his personality, but the human personality.
Well, I need to say, by the way, that Vivian, that I also highlighted that part of 366. The novelist, with a variety of his characters. Each of them is an aspect of himself. I put a couple of question marks in that. That a great novelist is able to empathize and objectify other people whom he knows and meets. So a great novelist sees people, observes character, and can objectify. It's not merely something purely subjective. There's something objective about the reading of character the great novelist has, and it just isn't necessarily true that every character in a novel is in some sense a facet of the author's personality. They're certainly things that the author has experienced, but it might be in the personality of others.
And that's a fine literary theory as far as it goes. That's
If
a
I just I thought, if I can be honest here, De Lubac's a much better philosopher and theologian than his literary critic.
well,
Well,
you're welcome to your literary theory. It's as good as far as it goes. It's not De Lubac's approach to this particular author, and that's
Right.
okay. You guys don't have to agree. That's okay.
Agreed.
But we
Agreed with
have
that.
to understand what De Lubac himself is saying. The first job for us is to understand what De Lubac is saying about Dostoevsky. And he is clearly saying something different from what.
Yes, of course. I understand what the Lubac's
Yeah.
saying about it. That's what I've just said. I think he's a better philosopher and theologian than his literary critic, because
Oh,
I think that Dostoevsky is not all of his characters. I think Dostoevsky's
no, he's not
observed the
all of
world
his.
around
I
him.
never said he was all of his characters. I'm saying in Brothers Karamazov, each of those characters represents a specific kind of view or dimension of human existence, or attitude towards human existence. And each one of those attitudes are attitudes which Dostoevsky either went through or struggled with in his own life.
that's right.
Agreed. I have no problem at all with that.
Okay. Wow. Okay. We're
I mean, this whole section on 366, the whole thing deserves to be read very carefully. Where De Lubac now, he's actually going into the truth about being a human being. You know, this I have in my nature, my temperament, my character, the things of my very self that I prescribe, some of which I ratify, some of which I endure. There's things about myself I have to endure. I wish I could change, and I have not been that successful at changing them. There are the characteristics I've inherited, those I've made for myself. These are the things I hide from myself and the things for which I yearn without possessing them, which are molding influence because they attract me. The beauty of what he's doing here is saying now that what De Lubac is, why he's going into this depth. I think he's actually trying to counter the claim that in order to be true to yourself, you have to follow every impulse, you have to follow every desire, you have to agree with every thought. And De Lubac is saying, no, in freedom, I can affirm the man I want to be and prescribe the man I don't want to be. It will be a struggle. I won't always be honest with myself and so on. But for you to say, you meaning this person out here, that in order to be a sincere person, I have to somehow just give in to every impulse. I mean, let's face it, this is one of the biggest heresies of the human person we're dealing with right now. I was born gay. I can't help it. That's who I am. I'm only sincere when I'm giving in to my homosexual temptations.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have no problem with anything you're saying there. And,
Yeah.
only thing that De Lubac's saying in that passage you just read, I want to be a bit careful about leaping ahead 30
Yeah, let's
pages.
not leap too far ahead, but
Because obviously we'd be missing stuff out if we do that. I would say one thing, and it's not disagreeing with you or Dostoevsky or De Lubac, but we can only know ourselves in communion with that which is outside of ourselves. It's first of all, it's impossible to do anything else because everything we experience is through our senses, which is experience something outside of ourselves. So we do have to commune with an objective reality, even to know what we are subjectively. And so that's very, very important. There's no such thing as a self-centered ego that's not actually eccentric in the sense that it has to be getting its data from outside itself.
all right.
Okay, so that was 338. I have 342. I don't know if anybody has anything before that.
I have 339.
Okay,
2/3 down, I think an important statement of De Lubac here. The age is not atheist because it could no longer find the means of reaching him, God. Its denial is a result of a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Like the overman and like the socialist, the modern rationalist is less atheist than anti-theist. And then
That's right.
there's another follow-up on that, which I jump ahead.
Well, before you go on, Father, I'd like to add this third character. This is the very next line. Moreover, is often found in association with the second. The building of the palace of glass and the building of the Tower of Babel often go hand in hand. Meaning the rationalist palace of glass and the overman, they work together to destroy faith in
So the one
God.
who claims to be completely objective, the empiricist, is actually working hand in hand with the one who's completely subjective, the egocentric Nietzschean. And I think actually, Father, I don't know if you want to talk about this, but I think that I think that we need to, if that statement, the modern rationalist is less atheist than anti-theist, we need to discuss what the difference is. Either what we think it is, and or what De Lubac thinks it is, and or what Dostoyevsky thinks it is.
Well, especially with Nietzsche, I mean, it wasn't that Nietzsche couldn't find God. He knew who God was claimed to be. He opposed it. It wasn't like, I don't know if there's a God or not, but rather, this person you say is God, I don't like him. I don't want him. So I'm against there being a God at all, because what does that do? It limits me. And like with Marx, the whole idea is, well, heaven is an expropriation like the capitalists. The capitalists take your capital and you're just labor now. And heaven takes all your worth and you're just nothing in relation to heaven. So they're fighting against any possible God. Let's put it that way. They're against there being a God because in their view, if there is a God, I am diminished. Therefore, there shall not be a God.
Yeah, wonderful. That's a wonderful way of putting it. And again, the irony is this is very irrational. In other words, it's a very subjective. I'm antagonistic towards the idea of the divine. Therefore, I'm going to oppose him whether he exists or not. Is not a rational position, right? An empiricist is a rational reductionist, but nonetheless rational, right? But this is basically egocentric. I don't want God to exist, and if he exists or not, I'm going to fight him.
Right.
So you want to go to 342?
Well, unless Vivian has something before that.
No.
And why don't you? I underlined or put a sidebar line on that whole quote there from Stepan Trofimovich on his deathbed. So is that what you wanted to comment on?
That's what I have highlighted, Father. So you do it.
No, go ahead. Read that whole thing.
I'm not going to do it. I mean, if I'm leading,
No, you're a better reader than I am. You speak English.
You'd like me to read it, yes? Oh, I
Yeah.
can read it certainly, but how about if I read it and you comment upon it? How
Well,
about
you comment on it too.
Okay. Well, so I'm going to start from the top in that case, which I've highlighted here. This is in quotes, God is necessary to me because he is the only being whom one can love eternally. End quote. No, it is not happiness that man is in search of, or at least it is not the sort of happiness he makes for himself in his time of illusion. That's an interesting phrase. And then the quote. Far more than he needs happiness, man needs to know and to believe every minute that somewhere else is a perfect, quiet happiness for each and all. The whole law of human existence consists in this, that man can at all times bow before something infinitely great. If human beings came to be deprived of this infinitely great something, they would no longer want to live and would die in despair. The incommensurable and the infinite are as necessary to man as the little planet on which he moves. My friends, all of you, long live the great thought, the eternal infinite thought. The whole of man, whatever he may be, feels a need to bow before it. Even the most stupid man has this need to bow before it. Petrushka, oh, how I wish it could see them all again. They do not know that they too have within them this great eternal thought. So the only thing I would say in that, Father, is first of all, the word thought there is, of course, capitalized. And it's not a thought in the subjective sense, right? It's the logos. It's the source of all thought, and that to which all true thought, in other words, true reason, leads. And we have an absolute need for this, that we are never going to be happy as long as we are narcissistically self-centered. So that's what I want to comment. And it's the difference between
It's not just self-centered, Joseph. It's that there's something bigger, beyond, above, transcendent, without which we can't be happy. We can't.
yeah, but I'm saying we need it. What I'm saying, Father, is that we need that objective reality, that logos, because subjectively ourselves, we are inadequate. We are unfulfilled. In other words,
Right.
we cannot be happy. I mean, I've mentioned this perhaps before. We do the same book club every week after week after week. You end up repeating yourself. But one of my favorite novels is Huysman's Arabur, where you got this person who is so stinking rich, complete, devoid of all attachments, who can do exactly what he wants, who can actually literally, he can satisfy, that's the wrong word. He can indulge every sensual desire, use all of his senses to do exactly what he wants. And at the end of it is a cri de coeur to a God he doesn't even know exists for help. In other words, can we find happiness without this infinite thought? No, we cannot.
Now, this character who's dying, this is what he says on his deathbed, this Stepan Trofimовich, is from, I think it's from The Possessed, right? The footnote 71. And
Yeah,
that's a
is.
novel I haven't read. I think I tried years ago to read
Nor
The
me,
Possessed.
nor me.
And so I don't know much about this character, to tell you the truth, but nevertheless, his understanding at his deathbed, right? That and Dostoevsky, or even like, to go to your point, Joseph, about this sensualist, or whoever it was, living for every pleasure. On 341 in the middle, the human eros, a ceaseless yearning for the infinite, pines at finding nothing on earth that is not alien to it. So even when we're off on the wrong foot, shall we say, and we're trying to satisfy these longings in us, we find out that these desires really are insatiable, because we're made for eternity. We're made to participate in something infinite. And we reach the end of the rope sooner or later, even if we've gone down the wrong road, like Baudelaire or whatever, right? And then there's this moment that opens up for a man this possibility of glimpsing that what he's been desiring all along was the eternal, infinite God.
Yeah, I mean,
That
the whole word satisfaction, the Latin satis, right? Satis means enough, right? Only God is enough. You're not going to be satisfied until you have him, because he's the only satisfying thing.
So I don't know what this character's life was like prior to this deathbed scene that Dostoevsky gives us, but we can only hope and pray that every human being will have the opportunity to realize, however late, wait, what? All this time I've been chasing after the wrong thing. I mean, this is actually a hopeful thing.
Absolutely. I actually have a few other things highlighted between now and the end of the chapter, but we're at 30 minutes and I'm happy to desist.
No, let's finish the chapter. But I
was about to say, I'm happy to desist. I'm also very happy for both of you. I'm deferring, basically, for the remainder of this episode.
You can't be truly happy, because that's an inner worldly type of an experience, but you can be somewhat happy, let's say. But I have a question for Vivian, because Vivian, as people may not know, is our senior editor here at Ignatius Press, and she gets manuscripts and helps make them much better. Here's my question for you, Vivian. If this passage which Joseph just read were in a manuscript novel by Michael O'Brien, would you have excised it?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I'm not sure if it's a fair
Because Vivian is very, she emphasizes, don't tell me, show me, and this is pretty philosophical, a philosophical discourse,
Right.
in the novel, which is Dostoyevsky is full of that, in many places. But would you let this thing pass?
I would have, because I don't think, a writer like Dostoevsky, I wouldn't dare touch with a pencil.
Okay.
Not even a red pencil. I wouldn't even touch it with a charcoal pencil. I mean,
Okay. Well,
that's all I'm going to say. Dostoevsky.
I think the difference between voices, and preaching. And I don't think this, Dostoevsky allows the voices, and he allows voices that contradict this, right? So, yeah.
And his characters, when you're reading his novels, his characters are so real to me. They're so vivid. They're not, and this is not a remark on Michael O'Brien at all. I want to leave Michael O'Brien out of it. I don't think it's fair to bring him into this, but I just want to say that the experience for me of reading Dostoevsky, every single character is a living soul. And I don't feel as though I'm being subjected to lectures or let me explain it to you, or I don't feel that way at all. That is not my experience. That is not the experience I'm having as a reader of his novels. I feel like, oh my goodness, this person is in the room with me, and or I'm in the room with him. and it doesn't. I wouldn't even occur to me to pick up a pencil. So
okay, very good. So I want to the bottom of that page, 342. We're talking. This is Makar Ivanovich, the Mujik. Man cannot live without kneeling. He could not bear it. Nobody would be capable of it. If he rejects God, he kneels before an idol of wood or gold or an imaginary one. And then they are all idolaters and not atheists. That's what they ought to be called. You have to have some ultimate ground of your being, some supreme good that you seek after. If it's not God, it'll be something else. I just want to comment on this man can live without kneeling. In Karl Ratziger's beautiful book, The Spirit of Liturgy, he has a quote there from the Fathers that the devil is portrayed as having no knees, that the devil can't kneel.
And often people are, back to Dostoevsky's understanding, which De Lubac explains or tries to, that man doesn't see himself honestly and objectively. And so the man who's kneeling before another idol, not another idol, a man who's kneeling before an idol, doesn't see that he's kneeling. And so that's part of the blindness of idolatry, is that you don't even see that you're kneeling before something else. Here you are claiming this, independence and autonomy and not needing God and blah, 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 blah. And I don't need to bend the knee and blah. Well, you are bending the knee just to something other than God. That's all.
Amen. I think that's a good conclusion to this chapter. Let's call this the conclusion of this session and return again for the next session. Thank you all. God bless you.
If you enjoyed this discussion, please help spread the word about the Forum Book Club by subscribing to the podcast and writing a review. You can sign up for weekly updates at formedbookclub.ignatius.com.